Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please make sure the volume of this podcast is set perfectly to your listening enjoyment. Please take your seat, whether that's on the treadmill, car, sofa, or bed, and buckle in for the last trip. My name is Jamie Beebe, and I'll be your tour guide recreating someone's last days in paradise. On behalf of myself and everyone behind the scenes, please enjoy the Last Trip podcast. And because nobody likes a long flight to get to where they want to be, let's prepare for takeoff. It was the start of a great weekend in early September 2009. 61-year-old Melvin Nadel, an experienced hunter, black belt in Taekwondo, and well-loved local gym owner, headed into the wilderness near Pecos, New Mexico for a bow hunting trip with friends. His friends left camp to do a little hunting, while Mel liked to stay close. So they planned to meet back before dark. Mel was prepared, fit, familiar with the area, and well-versed in the outdoors. But when his friends got back to camp, Mel had vanished. His Jeep was found locked and untouched. His gear was inside. Search efforts followed him a few hundred feet down a well-worn path. And then, nothing. No more scent, no blood, no signs of struggle. No evidence of an accident. Just nothing. As days turned into weeks and search crews scoured the forest, not a single clue surfaced. To this day, Melvin Nadel's disappearance remains one of the most baffling unsolved cases in New Mexico, fueling rumors of foul play, mysterious vanishings, and even whispers of something stranger lurking in the so-called Pecos Triangle. What happened to Melvin Nadel that day in the woods? To really learn about Melvin's disappearance, we need to learn about the forest he disappeared from. In the heart of northern New Mexico, where the aspens shimmer gold in the fall and the wind whispers through forests older than memory, there's a mountain that quietly looms above it all, Elk Mountain. Tucked inside the Pecos wilderness, part of the majestic Sangre de Cristo Mountains, Elk Mountain is more than just a peak. It's a place of raw power and ancient silence. It stands at 11,661 feet, not the tallest in the range, but unmistakable. Its rugged slopes cloaked in pine and fir, its ridgelines often kissed by clouds. It's the kind of place that feels alive, breathing, watching. For hikers, it's a challenge. For hunters, a haven. And for the curious or the spiritually attuned, it's something else entirely. A place of whispers, wonder, and the unexplained. To understand Elk Mountain is to understand the land it rises from. This is the Pecos Wilderness, over 223,000 acres of protected land, where no cars, no roads, and no machines are allowed. Just a sky, stone, trees, and the echo of your own heartbeat. The trails here are legendary. Backpackers can traverse the Skyline Trail, tracing the spine of the mountains for miles on end. Others follow the Windsor Trail from Santa Fe, gradually climbing into the high alpine meadows dotted with wildflowers and mule deer. But once you leave the popular routes behind and move toward Elk Mountain itself, something shifts. The air feels heavier. The forest grows darker. Time seems to slow. Locals say compasses can spin near the mountain. Some hunters, even the seasoned ones, refuse to go near it alone. There are reports, unverified but persistent, of strange lights in the trees at night, voices calling out in the wind, and footsteps in the brush with no one there. Dogs whimper, GPS fails. Hikers find themselves inexplicably turned around, repeating loops they swear they didn't walk. It earned Elk Mountain a reputation as the centerpiece of the Pecos Triangle, a mysterious zone bordered roughly by Santa Fe, Las Vegas, and Taos. Some call it New Mexico's answer to the Bermuda Triangle, a place where people vanish without a trace. And vanish they have. Experienced outdoorsmen, hunters, solo hikers, people like Melvin Nadel, who knew these woods well And yet, one moment he was there, the next, gone. No footprints, no dropped gear, not even a scent trail for the dogs to follow. Just empty space where a person should have been. Skeptics chalk it up to the remoteness, to bad weather, or predators. And yes, this is bear country. Mountain lions roam here too. The weather can shift dangerously fast. A sunny afternoon can turn into a blizzard without warning, especially in September. But others aren't so sure. Theories swirl, paranormal phenomena, ancient spirits, energy vortexes, time slips, or something even more cosmic. Indigenous lore speaks of guardian spirits in the mountains, beings that protect the land and sometimes remove those who disrespect it. Spanish conquistadors brought their own fears. They spoke of enchanted gold hidden deep in the sangres, protected by curses, guarded by shadows. Elk Mountain seems to exist at the intersection of all of it, nature, myth, and mystery. But it's not all fear and folklore. For many, Elk Mountain is a place of deep personal connection. Artists and photographers are drawn to its vistas, especially in early morning light when mist curls through the trees and the world feels untouched. Spiritual seekers and solitude lovers say the mountain offers clarity, silence, space to think and breathe and feel something bigger than yourself. Campers might spend a night under a dome of stars so clear they feel fake. You'll hear coyotes singing in the distance, maybe the rustle of elk moving through the brush, and if you're lucky, you'll spot one. Their great antlers rising like tree limbs, breath misting in the cold dawn air. There's no lodge, no ranger station, no cell towers. You bring in what you need and carry out what you don't. It's wild, unfiltered, demanding. And that's the point. Because Elk Mountain isn't for everyone. It doesn't cater to comfort. It doesn't offer answers. It challenges you to pay attention, to move with care, to ask deeper questions about where you are, and maybe about who you are. So whether you come here to hunt, to hike, to disappear for a while, or to try to understand the strange energy that pulses through these trees, know this: you're walking into a place that has outlasted civilizations, weathered legends, and swallowed mysteries whole. Elk Mountain is sacred, savage, stunning. It welcomes you, but only on its terms. Because for all its beauty, Elk Mountain keeps its secrets. It doesn't just challenge hikers or dazzle travelers. Sometimes it takes. Melvin Nadel was not the kind of man you'd expect to vanish without a trace. He was grounded, capable, sharp, a man of habits, of heart, and of extraordinary resilience. Before the mystery, before the headlines, before the silence left behind in those dense woods, there was a life, a full one, a man deeply woven into his family, his passions, and his purpose. So before we trace his final steps, let's go back to the story of Melvin Nadel, the man before the mystery. Melvin Nadel was the kind of man who couldn't be pinned down by a single label. He was a Brooklyn-born New Yorker who carved out a new life in the high desert of New Mexico. A man with calloused hands, a sharp mind, and a heart rooted in family, community, and nature. Born on March 13, 1948, Melvin grew up in Brooklyn. But by 1991, he and his wife made a big decision. They left behind the bustle of city life and headed west, settling in the rugged, sunlit terrain of New Mexico. It wasn't just a change of scenery. It was a change in pace, in values, in purpose. Melvin poured himself into a life that was quieter, but no less full. He and his wife Edna raised their daughter Kristen with care and intention. In fact, Melvin homeschooled her for most of her life, passing on not just academics, but the kind of street smarts and survival instincts that don't come from a textbook. He was more than just a dad. He was her best friend. At the time of his disappearance, his daughter was just 18 years old and already enrolled in community college. She was bright, curious, and well ahead of her peers, thanks in no small part to Melvin's guidance. They spent most of their time together. and the bond they shared was the kind that doesn't loosen easily. Melvin was also a man of many trades and passions. He had the brain of a techie, loved working with computers, and often helped others fix theirs. He had the hands of a craftsman, once owning a jewelry store where he designed and sold pieces with care and precision. And he had the body of an athlete, a well-known fitness instructor, and the proud owner of Pilates Fitness Plus, a gym on South St. Francis Drive in Santa Fe. His classes were popular, his teaching style tough but supportive, and his enthusiasm contagious. He was also a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo, a title that spoke not only to his physical strength, but to his discipline and focus. His wife would later say he had no serious health issues at the time he vanished, other than a minor injury, a knee he'd hurt while teaching a Pilates class earlier that week. It had been bothering him, and he'd been wearing a brace, and some people close to him thought maybe he shouldn't go on that year's hunting trip. But Mel was nothing if not resilient. He insisted that wasn't that bad, that he could handle it. Being in nature was his therapy, and he wasn't going to miss it. Hunting was one of Mel's lifelong passions, but he wasn't the kind of hunter who stalked his prey through the woods. He preferred patience, sitting quietly in a blind, waiting for the game to come to him. It was meditative, grounding. And when you picture that, Melvin out there in the forest, calm and steady, kneeling in a patch of light with his bow beside him, it's hard to imagine that anything could go wrong. Melvin was more than just his hobbies. He had a deep love for music, especially rock and roll, the kind that crackles out of old speakers and gets under your skin. He had a quick wit, a quiet intensity, and a reputation as someone you could count on. He was always learning, always tinkering, always exploring. Friends and family described him as a jack of all trades, someone equally at home in a Pilates studio, a computer lab, a jewelry workshop, or deep in the wilderness. By all accounts, Mel was happy with his life. He was grounded, healthy, and had no reason to disappear. He loved his wife. He adored his daughter. He wasn't a man on the run or lost in the world. He was rooted. So when he walked into that Santa Fe National Forest on the afternoon of September 6, 2009, bow in hand, knee brace in place, and plans to return, no one expected that would be the last anyone ever saw of him. Melvin Nadel was a man who had built a life rich in love, purpose, and presence. And then he was gone. It was Labor Day weekend, September 6, 2009, when Melvin Nadel headed into the Elk Mountains of northern New Mexico for a bow hunting trip. He wasn't alone. He was joined by two companions, Joe Muniz, a longtime friend, and Joe's brother-in-law, Eric. The three men were experienced hunters. They set up a camp near a clearing deep in the forest, off a dirt road not far from the Pecos River, a place Melvin had visited before. Mel brought with him his .44 special revolver, a camouflage print Martin compound bow, and a set of black and white zebra-striped arrows. But that weekend, he also brought something else, his knee injury. Because just days earlier, he'd tweaked it while teaching a Pilates class at his gym in Santa Fe. He'd been wearing a brace, and did debate whether or not he should go on the trip, but ultimately decided the pain wasn't bad enough to keep him out of the woods. Melvin loved being in nature, and he wasn't about to miss it. At around 4:30 p.m., Joe and Eric decided to hike farther out in search of elk, and Melvin, cautious after a previous incident when he had gotten lost, chose to stay closer to camp. And back then, he'd only been found after firing his gun into the air to signal for help, a mistake he didn't intend to repeat. Since then, he always carried a GPS unit to help him navigate. But that afternoon, his GPS stayed locked inside his 2001 Jeep Cherokee, along with his backpack, wallet, and phone. He had planned only to build a blind, a camouflage structure hunters use to hide from animals and wait in silence, so no reason to go far. But when Joe and Eric returned a few hours later, the camp was quiet. Melvin wasn't there. His Jeep hadn't moved. His belongings were untouched. It was as if he'd stepped into the trees and vanished. The men grew concerned. They started honking their car horns, hoping the sound would help guide him back. They fired their rifles into the air, just like Mel had once done to be rescued himself. And strangely, they heard 2 gunshots in the distance, possibly from Melvin's own revolver. But no voice, no reply, no footsteps returning through the underbrush. After several more hours with no sign of Mel, they reported him missing. By the next morning, search and rescue teams had assembled. Some came from the state, others were local volunteers, friends, family, and members of the community who knew Mel or just wanted to help. Canine units were brought in, and the dogs managed to track Mel's scent for about 50 to 150 yards from the campsite. But then, abruptly, the trail disappeared. No arrows, no shell casings, no animal tracks, no signs of a struggle. Nothing. Melvin Nadel had vanished in broad daylight in an open forest, armed, experienced, and only a short distance from his own camp. The official search was eventually called off. Months later, a second search was launched, nearly 9 months after his disappearance. But again, no clues, not a single shred of clothing, not his bow, not his arrows, not his knife, not even a footprint. His daughter, Kristen, was devastated. Mel wasn't just her father, he was her best friend. They'd been nearly inseparable. She described their bond as something beyond just parent and child. He had taught her, raised her, protected her, and now he was gone. Kristen did what she could to keep his story alive. She wrote a book called Freebird, a tribute to her father, and a title drawn from the Lynyrd Skynyrd song they used to sing together on their long drives through the mountains and deserts of New Mexico. That song, to her, was their anthem. And suddenly, the lyrics held new meaning. And this bird you cannot change. Kristen and her mother did interviews with local news stations, day after day, each time sitting in front of the camera and hoping, praying that someone out there might know something. But what the media wanted was pain, not just a story. They wanted tears, emotion, the kind of public display Kristen simply wasn't able or willing to give. And when she didn't cry on camera, the comments came in. Cold, cruel things, accusations, people saying she probably wanted him gone, that she didn't care, that she was suspicious. She was a teenager, grieving her father and reading messages from strangers calling her a liar. She later said, "People don't think about what they say online. They don't realize how damaging those words can be. Everyone processes grief differently, and when you're just trying to survive it, why should you be expected to perform it for a camera?" And while Kristen tried to fight for answers, she also questioned the search effort itself. She believed more could have been done. The family had asked for infrared helicopters, which can detect body heat from the air, standard practice in many searches, but those never came. They had hoped the area around his Jeep would be treated like a crime scene, but instead, it remained accessible, unlocked, untouched, unguarded, for days. By the time authorities returned it, it had been sitting there, wide open to contamination. Kristen says she doesn't have any evidence, no names, no suspects, but her gut tells her this wasn't an accident, that it wasn't just a man who got lost in the woods. She doesn't point fingers. Everyone close to her father, including his friends Joe and Eric, and even she and her mother, were thoroughly investigated and cleared. But still, she can't shake the feeling that something darker happened. It just doesn't make sense. He had a gun, a knife, a bow. He was close to camp. He was trained, experienced, and wouldn't go far. And then he was just gone. No trace, not even a sock. And the terrain itself makes the story even more perplexing. This wasn't a dense forest. The area where they camped was a large open clearing. There was a dirt road nearby. If Melvin had gotten disoriented, he likely could have found a path back, or made it to the road. He wasn't deep in the wild. He wasn't cut off from the world. The Pecos River ran through the forest, and yes, it was searched. But it turned up nothing. To this day, there are no leads, no evidence, no new information. Just a family left behind, still waiting, still hoping. Melvin Nadel's story didn't disappear because people weren't looking. It disappeared because he did, and no one knows how or why. When a man like Melvin Nadel vanishes without a trace in broad daylight, less than 200 yards from his own camp, it's impossible not to ask the question, how? How does someone, armed, experienced, cautious, disappear completely without leaving behind so much as a footprint, a torn shirt, or a dropped arrow? Now, over the years, many theories have emerged. Some are grounded in logic. Others are fueled by intuition, suspicion, or even folklore. But all of them try to explain the same thing: how a man could step into the forest and never come back. Let's walk through the possibilities. Now, Theory 1, he got lost or died of natural causes. Now, there's a saying among seasoned hikers and hunters: the forest doesn't care how experienced you are. You can know the terrain, carry all the right gear, take every precaution, and still vanish. So when Melvin Nadel disappeared from the Elk Mountains in northern New Mexico, some wondered, maybe this was just a tragic accident. Maybe nature, indifferent and wild, simply swallowed him whole. It's a theory grounded in reality, on the surface, at least. Melvin had every reason to be cautious that day. He had a bad knee, and he had gotten lost before, which prompted him to always carry that GPS. But on the day he disappeared, Mel didn't have his GPS on him, or his wallet, or his phone, or his backpack. Everything he needed to survive or be found was locked in his Jeep. Could Melvin have suffered a medical event? A heart attack, a stroke, a ruptured aneurysm? He was 61. He was recently injured. He could have been dehydrated, stressed, or in pain. A sudden medical emergency could have dropped him in his tracks. No struggle, no chance to call out. But here's where that theory unravels. Searchers combed that forest with extraordinary precision. They had more than 50 volunteers on foot searching several times. No blood, no body, no boots, no bow, no scent, nothing. The dogs at most followed his trail for 150 yards, and then it vanished, as if he stepped off the trail and into a different dimension. That's not typical for someone who wandered too far. People who get lost usually try to find their way back. They leave broken branches, dropped items, footprints, or scent trails. Melvin left none of those. Even in the most tragic wilderness disappearances, people fall off cliffs, drown, succumb to exposure. Eventually, something turns up. Bones, a shirt, hat, a skeleton uncovered by animals or weather or time. If this were a case of natural causes, of getting lost or succumbing to a health crisis, we would expect nature to leave us some kind of an answer. Now, theory number 2, an animal attack. The Elk Mountains are wild country. Black bears, mountain lions, bobcats, coyotes, they all roam the woods. Could Melvin have been stalked, taken down by a predator while waiting in his blind? Maybe, but highly unlikely. First, Melvin was armed. He had a .44 special revolver, a bow, and a knife. And he wasn't a passive observer. He was a capable outdoorsman with a black belt in Taekwondo and years of experience under his belt. Second, there would be signs. Animal attacks leave trails. Blood, drag marks, fur, paw prints, evidence of a struggle. There was none of that. No broken bush. No signs of defense or flight. Not even a single arrow on the ground. And predators, while fierce, don't tend to clean up their kills so thoroughly that absolutely nothing is left behind. Even the dogs found nothing. They didn't track his scent to a river or a cliff or a cave. It just stopped, mid-trail, mid-air. If an animal had taken Melvin, where did he and all his gear go? And the silence in the evidence speaks louder than any growl in the trees. Now, theory number 3 is foul play. And this is a theory that Kristen, Mel's daughter, returns to most often. Not because she has proof, not because there's a smoking gun, but because something about this disappearance just doesn't sit right. He didn't go far, he didn't take his stuff, and he never would have just left Kristen like that. Melvin was hunting with 2 companions, Joe Muniz and Joe's brother-in-law, Eric. They were the last people to see him. They were the ones who waited for him to come back. They were the ones who reported him missing. They were also thoroughly investigated and cleared, as were Kristen and her mother. Law enforcement didn't find any evidence of foul play. There were no bloodstains, no weapons missing from the Jeep, no signs of confrontation. But the possibility still lingers. What if something went wrong out there? A disagreement, an accident, something that escalated. What if Melvin had stumbled across something or someone he wasn't supposed to see? A trespasser, another hunter, someone hiding something? Or what if someone arrived at the site after the others had gone? Kristen has spoken openly about the mishandling of the scene. Melvin's Jeep was left unlocked, untouched, never cordoned off. It sat in the woods, accessible to anyone, until it was eventually returned home. That Jeep could have held clues, DNA, prints, but no forensic sweep was done. Nothing was protected. Nothing was preserved. Kristen said it never felt like they took it seriously, and by the time they did, it was too late. And foul play is a theory with no hard evidence, but it's also the only theory that explains why there's no evidence at all. Then there's our fourth theory, the Pecos Triangle. And for centuries, this part of New Mexico has whispered with strange stories. Disappearances, lights in the sky, portals, beings not of this world. Locals call it the Pecos Triangle, a stretch of wilderness known for its beauty and its mystery. We could look at another case, Emma Tresp in 1998, whose car was found abandoned on County Road 63A, Camino del Diablo, or the Devil's Road. Her footprints only circled her vehicle, and search dogs found no trail leading away. And she was a seasoned 71-year-old who knew the route well, yet she vanished almost immediately in sight of her car. Mel was gone in much the same way. Scent dogs picked up his trail for a few yards, but then stopped dead. No tracks heading back, no paths diverging, just nothingness. The Pecos wilderness is rugged and scenic. From 8,400 to over 13,000 feet, it's filled with ridges, mesas, pine forests, and craggy canyons. But paradoxically, it's not so remote that someone would go missing without being found. Trails, logging roads, cabins, and old Indian paths crisscross the land. Searchers note there are clearings, high points, and even pioneer roads. Routes people can stumble onto and emerge from. Yet, several individuals have disappeared within short daylight treks, in areas with multiple landmarks and human traffic, and left behind no physical trace. Common threads include no struggle, an abrupt end to scent and footprints, no found gear or clothing. And many of the disappearing people were experienced outdoors people. And Mel fits this pattern. 61 years old, fit, a hunter, martial artist, likely to panic, get lost, or miss a clear trail. There have been UFO sightings, strange lights, and unexplained nocturnal phenomena in the area. Some people even speculate about skinwalkers or demon guardians spawned from native legends. Others speak of an energy vortex or portal, a realm where reality bends and people slip through the cracks. It's in these tales, some say, that the wilderness erases people whole. Of course, these aren't mainstream theories. But when faced with no bodies, no evidence, and multiple disappearances in a tight radius area, people start looking at possibilities, even fantastical ones. Theory 5 is that he simply ran away to start a new life. Now, this is the theory the family hates the most. The idea that Melvin just walked away, that he left his Jeep, his daughter, his gym, his whole life behind, and vanished into the wild. Maybe to start a new life, maybe with another woman, maybe to escape something no one else knew about. But everything we know about Melvin makes that unlikely. He wasn't in a crisis. He wasn't depressed. He wasn't talking about leaving. He was deeply connected to his daughter, to his wife, to his business. He had responsibilities, and he had a home. And again, he left everything behind. His phone, his money, his gear. If you're planning to run away, you don't do it with only a knee brace and a bow. And the cruelest part of this theory, it implies that he chose to leave the people who loved him the most. And there's just no version of Melvin who would do that. Every theory leaves something on the table. A missing piece, a dangling thread, a haunting silence. Maybe it was natural causes. Maybe it was something darker. Maybe it was something we'll never understand. But this is what remains. A man is gone. A daughter is left with questions and cruel internet comments. A wife who never got to say goodbye. A forest that won't give up its secrets. No evidence, no answers, just echoes in the trees. When someone disappears in the wilderness, especially someone like Melvin Nadel, it hits differently. Melvin wasn't some inexperienced hiker. He wasn't lost because he was careless. He was smart, capable, and cautious. He'd been out in those woods before. He knew the terrain. He loved nature. And still, he vanished. Stories like this shake us because they remind us that nature doesn't play favorites. It doesn't matter how many times you've been to the same mountain or how strong you think you are. The wilderness is beautiful, powerful, and deeply unpredictable. So let's talk about safety. Let's talk about what we can learn from Melvin's story and so many others like it. Not in a checklist kind of way, but in a real, boots on the ground, survival meets common sense kind of way. Because sometimes what feels like a small choice ends up being the thing that decides whether or not you come home. First, never go out alone, not even just around the bend. Melvin had no plan to wander far that day. He stayed close to camp on purpose. He'd already been lost before, so he knew how quickly things could go wrong. This time, he played it safe, or so he thought. But even a short walk near camp can turn into a disappearance. If you're heading out, even for 5 minutes, let someone know. Better yet, agree on specific times to check in and regroup. If someone doesn't show up, don't wait. Start looking right away. And when it comes to gear, don't just bring it, carry it. Melvin's backpack, GPS, and cell phone were all locked in his Jeep. It's a small detail, but a massive one. He probably assumed he wouldn't need them. He wasn't going far, right? But that gear, especially the GPS, could have changed everything. Always have your essentials on you, not back at camp, not in your truck, on you. And yes, technology can fail. Learn how to use a map and compass. Mark your location, know your landmarks, and double check where you are before you leave the trail. And let's talk about clothing. Mel was wearing full camouflage that day. Jacket, shirt, pants, the whole thing. Perfect for hunting, yes, but not great if someone's trying to find you. Camouflage is designed to make you disappear, and that's the last thing you want in a search and rescue scenario. So pack something high visibility, a blaze orange vest, a bright bandana, even a strip of reflective tape. You can always put it on after the hunt. But if you go missing, that pop of color could be the difference between being spotted or not. Another thing, sound matters. In the past, when Melvin got lost, he fired his gun into the air to signal rescuers. And that's smart. It's loud, it works, but it only works if people know what to listen for. Make sure your group agrees on a signal. 3 shots, 3 whistle blasts, 3 of anything, because that's the universal SOS. 3. And if you're at camp and you hear something strange, don't ignore it. Trust your instincts. Investigate. It might be nothing, or it might be the chance to find someone before it's too late. And please, don't pack your emergency kit and then leave it in the vehicle. Bring it with you, every time. No exceptions. You don't need a 20-pound survival pack, just the basics. A whistle, a flashlight, an emergency blanket, fire starters, a knife, some water or purification tablets, a reflective mirror. Small tools that can do big things when you're out there in the dark, alone, with the temperature dropping, and no idea how to get back. Also, Know the terrain, but don't trust it blindly. Trails shift, markers disappear, wildlife and weather change everything. A path you knew like the back of your hand 5 years ago might not be there today. So, before you head out, check updated maps, talk to rangers, and let someone back home know your full route and your backup route. Because sometimes it's not the mountain that changes, it's the way back down. And whether you're hunting or just hiking with the group, communicate clearly about your weapons. Let people know what you're carrying. Let them know your call. Mistaken identity happens more than we like to admit, especially in low light or dense forest. Identify your target and what's beyond it, always. And finally, if you see something, say something. If you hear a noise, catch a flash of movement, find a footprint, or stumble on gear that doesn't belong, don't brush it off. Tell someone, mark it, report it. In Melvin's case, search dogs picked up his scent just yards from camp. It was that close. Then, nothing. One clue, one piece of evidence. That's all it might take to find someone who's lost. Melvin did so many things right. He was fit, he was experienced, he was careful, and still, he vanished. Let that sit with you. Not to scare you, but to ground you. Because preparedness isn't just for beginners. It's for all of us, every time. Whether you're hiking a marked trail or hunting familiar woods, you don't just owe it to yourself to be safe. You owe it to the people who are counting on you to come home. So take your safety seriously. Take each other seriously. And never assume it can't happen to you. Because nature doesn't play favorites. Melvin Nadel was known to his friends and loved ones simply as Mel. He was 61 years old the day he vanished into the wilderness of Pecos, New Mexico. He was just 5'2", weighed 135 pounds, and had an injured knee wrapped carefully beneath layers of gear. He was dressed for the terrain, wearing a camouflage print jacket, matching shirt and pants, polypropylene underclothes, thermal socks, and sturdy hiking boots. He wore a Lucky 13 pendant. On his wrist, a black Seiko watch. Now, these aren't statistics. These are small, personal details that someone might recognize, that someone might remember, that might still matter. Mel had black hair, brown eyes, and a lifetime of experience outdoors. And he didn't just disappear from the forest that day in September 2009. He disappeared from the lives of his daughter, his family, his friends, and a community that continues to ask questions with no answers. No trace, no sightings, no resolution. If you have any information, no matter how minor it might seem, about the disappearance of Melvin Nadel from Pecos, New Mexico on September 6, 2009, please contact the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office at 505-986-2490 or reach out to the New Mexico Department of Safety's Missing Persons Clearinghouse. Because someone out there knows something. And after all these years, Mel's family deserves the truth, closure, peace. And Mel deserves to be found. And finally, remember to leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars if you like the show, or hell, even if you don't. But either way, feel free to let me know what you think. Please follow The Last Trip on Instagram at The Last Trip Crime Pod, and subscribe on Patreon to support the show. You'll get extra research, videos, photos, and updates, and even learn more about my personal travels. That's patreon.com/The Last Trip Podcast. I'm Jamie Beebe, bringing you your last trip and signing off until the next one. Thanks for listening.